It's kind of funny when you get back from a deployment, they always ask, well, do you feel like hurting yourself or do you feel like hurting others? I mean, you're talking to somebody as a career military officer or in CIC, you think they're going to say, oh yeah, my supervisor who came into my office and would, cuss me out on a daily basis. Yeah, of course. No, I never had any negative thoughts about that. I mean, it's kind of silly, isn't it?
Welcome to another episode of Conservative Talk Chicago. I'm your host, Jack Novak. Along with my team, we post episodes to impartially and pragmatically review the most important political issues without the innuendo and half-truths of liberally biased media. We do this through discourse and interviews with conservative elected officials, community leaders, and candidates who share their stories and unbiased perspectives, providing common sense answers and solutions to issues that affect Illinois residents. If you're as frustrated as we and feel that most mainstream news is liberally biased and disingenuous, then welcome to Conservative Talk Chicago. We welcome your questions, concerns, and ideas. Please send them by email to talktome@conservativetalkchicago.com. At this time, I'd like to introduce our special guest. He currently lives in Naperville, where he and his wife have raised 4 children. As a young man, he grew up in Elgin, moving at least 6 times as he was growing up. He attended different schools where he participated in extracurricular activities, including sports, the performing arts, and theater productions. He also continued to work while in school, delivering newspapers in each of the different neighborhoods he and his family had moved to. Upon graduating high school, he continued to work, putting himself through college. He attended North Central College, and after graduation, started coaching in both men's and women's sports. It was during his time coaching that he realized he was refining both communication and leadership skills. He eventually enlisted in the Army, and in the fall of 1992, he began as a chaplain assistant and also continued to coach for the U.S. Army Prep School, and then for the Army and Marine Marathon teams. While serving, he attended officer candidate training, was commissioned into the Signal Officer Corps, and became the platoon leader for the 67th Signal Battalion. He saw combat deployments to Bosnia, Croatia, and to Iraq. While serving his country, he also managed to earn a master's in human relations and a doctorate in organizational leadership. He served his country for over 20 years. After retiring from active duty in 2012, he then continued serving as a Department of Defense contractor. He worked at U.S. European Command and U.S. AFRICOM, where he was responsible for evaluating, planning, and the analysis of critical infrastructure. He had served with distinction and earned many awards for his service, including the Kosovo Campaign Medal, the NATO Medal, the Operation Iraqi Freedom Campaign Medal, 3 Meritorious Service Medals, and the Joint Meritorious Service Medal. As a disabled veteran, he worked diligently for the benefit of other veterans and founded an organization to help veterans and their families transition from military to civilian life. It was the many years in the military of continued struggle dealing with government bureaucracy that convinced him that there was a real need to reduce government inefficiencies. This realization became the tipping point that gave him a resolve, and he decided to lead instead of follow and run for higher office. He decided that as a congressman, he could make a difference, preventing others from enduring the frustration caused by inefficient bureaucracy, and through his governance, help others achieve their true potential. I could go on, as this man has a lot of history to share, and I'm sure he'll captivate you as he has me. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Lieutenant Colonel Mike Pierce, retired, candidate for Congress, District 11. Welcome, Mike, to Conservative Talk Chicago.
Thanks very much. Great to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
You're welcome. There's so much to ask. You've got such a varied background, but I put some questions together. I hope you can basically explain to yourself to the audience, because the candidates that come in here, they're here basically to present themselves, to the audience that they want to get votes. Those candidates that come in, like yourself, okay, they're explaining themselves, and they're basically talking about their background, their history, who they are, why they become the person they are today. So I would like to first start out with, you served our nation in the Army, okay, from the early 90s until you retired in 2012. Okay, you continue to serve with the DOD, Department of Defense, after you retired. You've been in combat situations. Okay, through all that, you still want to serve your country in the political arena. I don't know why, based on what's going on, but it's very commendable. Okay, that time in the military forces a man to face his demons, okay, and his fears. You spend a lot of time. I mean, you've retired from the military and you continue to serve. So if you could explain, could you recall some of the experiences that you faced and how those experiences helped define the man you are today?
Sure, that'd be great. The military, and from epoch to epoch changes. But one thing about it remains the same. No matter which way, what war you're in, what conflict you're in, or if it's going, serving without conflict, it's an organization which relies on people looking to the left and looking to the right and knowing that they can count on each other. So, the most important part of it is to be able to count on somebody, and that really comes down to love. You gotta love your team. You gotta love the soldier next to you on each side of you. You gotta love your country. It's about selfless service. So for me, going in the military was something I felt called to do, and I knew that I wouldn't feel like I had achieved some of my life goals unless I'd gone in. And that's why I continue to serve, because I felt I answered the calling, and then I feel now today, wow, look, there's even more of a calling. As far as what are my big challenge that I saw, there's different times, and you said face your demons. I like how you phrase that, because everybody's challenge is different. For me, one of my biggest challenges was just facing the areas where I don't know the answer and learning how to find the people who know the answer, to be able to work with people, not to push people to get things done, but to lead by example and to be able to reach out to help get something done, but maintain that level of mutual respect. As an officer and a former enlisted, I had a great perspective because I could work with non-commissioned officers who really are the backbone of the Army. And so I always had a great relationship with whoever was my non-commissioned officer that I was working with. It was a team effort. And I believe that whether I was only a few miles from the Georgia-Russian line of demarcation in the country of Georgia, or when I was in Iraq, or when I was down in Hungary or Kosovo, the one thing I could always count on was that, I had a good, strong, non-commissioned officer who had worked his way up and had a lot of knowledge, or she who had worked up and had a lot of knowledge. And so the times where I've had really the biggest challenge that I faced probably was the lengthy tour, almost the Groundhog Day kind of reality of when I was in Iraq for 15 months. That's a grind. You get there, it goes through a lot just to get there. Then you're there, and then you're there. You're not there for 6 months. You're not there for 9 months. You see units come, units go, but you're still there. And after a while, it really wears you down. And it's an institution. Okay, the military is like an institution where it's got its common rules, it's got its common community, and it's got some people who are isolated well above everybody else, and then there's kind of like the rest of us. They've got different groups and subgroups, and so to be able to maintain your role as a leader, as well as deal with your own personal issues and take care of your family from afar, and at the same time take care of your soldier family. That's a real challenge. There are many moments when I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to make it through this? Not because it was dangerous per se, but because it's just such a lengthy, monotonous tour, and very often they can turn into toxic environments. So you really have to be well-centered in your faith and be able to know where you're going and know why you're doing what you're doing.
So basically, it was an evolution for you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And your perspective on life?
Big challenge, just going from an enlisted guy with no experience, being a former chaplain assistant, right, at the chaplain school, and then going to Fort Benning, Georgia, and being in the same OCS class, Officer Candidate School class, as guys who are 3 or 4 ranks above you. Sergeant. These guys were sergeant first classes. Some of them were Rangers. Some of them were Special Forces kind of guys. people who got to multiple, non-commissioned officer and helicopter or EOD, explosive ordnance disposal schools. These were like really, really high-speed guys. And here's this guy, 100 and not even $120 that I slimmed down. Not that I had that much to slim down, but I did a couple of marathons before I went to OCS. Who knows nothing about the rest of the Army, and his only experience was working as a chaplain assistant and as a coach at the chaplain school and the U.S. Military Academy Prep School. And so it was you learn so much about what you don't know. And then you get through that, and then you go to a unit, and you learn that all of a sudden you're in charge of millions of dollars worth of equipment, the lives of over 40 people, where like 3 months earlier, you were a specialist. And people were telling you what to do, and all of a sudden now you're in charge of that. So that's a rapid evolution. And then probably 2 years later after that, I became a company commander. The day I pinned on captain, I became a company commander and also in charge of the personnel and logistics for a unit in Europe, the S1 or S4 of a battalion is what it's called, because it was they had simply just drawn down a lot. And so I was like basically the only captain in the unit. So I had triple hats. I was the detachment commander, company commander. I had the personnel responsibility, I had the supply responsibility, and I was also the budget officer. So that's what the great thing about the military is. It makes you step up. And this is where you can either fall or not. You can rise to the occasion or not. And in this case, I was able to successfully do that. Then a couple of years later, I was an observer controller at a combat training center. So again, I went from a strategic communications place, which was way, way back, just in charge of making sure the communications were working. Then all of a sudden, I was assigned to a group that was field artillery and at a combat training center, preparing people to go down to Kosovo and to Bosnia and later on Iraq and Afghanistan, training people in communications that were really at the tactical or the on-the-ground level. Being the subject matter expert on that. And again, a quick evolution, one which you had to either rise up or, you're not going to do well. And it's very humbling because you learn very early, wow, I don't know anything about this, and quickly they move you on to another location. So that's the beauty of the military, but it's also a challenge, personal challenge. Every time I was in a unit, it was like that. You get there, you have to learn, you're starting at ground zero. But what you've got this leadership template that you're developing along the way. So when I went down to Iraq, I was responsible for the northern third of Iraq's sustainment footprint communications. So basically, all those trucks that are going down the highways of Iraq, I think they traveled like 1 million miles worth of roads over the time that we were there. We were responsible for the water, and not very glamorous, water, trucks, beans, bullets is what they say. But I had multiple bases that I had to make sure the communications were working. I had to make sure that the long-haul communications that go all the way back to Germany or to the U.S. were working. And then I had to make sure that the local on-site communications, and communications means everything with a cord. So it could be computers, it could be radios, it could be all of these many, many types of equipment that we don't see in the regular world outside. So again, quick evolution. And the main thing was you realize as a leader, you've got to be able to count on a team. You got to build your team, ensure the team understands what the task is, and ensure that they are able to get that task accomplished and that you're taking care of them so that at the end of that 15-month tour, you're all going back safely.
Mike, it sounds like with all that experience, you'll be able to create teams to do work as congressman because your platform is extremely solid, the things you want to accomplish. Okay, but before I get to that, I'd like to ask you a question about, you mentioned being a chaplain. You mentioned
chaplain assistant.
Chaplain assistant. Okay,
just want to make sure we're good.
Thank you. You were a combat veteran. All right. You were a coach. Okay. In the service and outside the service before you got into service. Okay. You were a youth minister, and you were also a missionary. Serving people of Central America, mostly Nicaragua.
Yeah.
Okay? So you've got a varied experience. And in that varied experience, you met a lot of people that were doing very well, a lot of people who had a lot of needs. Okay, and you strive to do the best you can to help those people. As someone wanting to continue to serve your community, I mean, as Congressman of the 11th District, what are some of the most pressing issues that you see today, okay, that define your candidacy based on everything you've done so far to want to serve the people that you care about?
I think we need to take a look at what is our community today. It is not the same community it was when I showed up at North Central College in 1983 in Naperville, Illinois. Bright red spot on the map, DuPage County. Today, that county is very purplish. Naperville is becoming purple-bluish. The communities in the district have all changed substantially. And I think that's where my life experience really can help the district achieve a higher level of really accomplishment for people who live here, help them achieve that American dream. And I say that because I've lived on both sides of the tracks and both sides of the river, whether it's in Elgin. I've lived and worked in Elgin. I've lived and worked in Aurora. I was a paper boy in Elgin, as soon as I could first thing, go get a paper boy job. And then they had these things, you go out and you talk to people and get them to get, to take the newspaper. So I used to do those. So I'm sure that helped me with developing my people skills. And then I delivered Chicago Tribunes. And then I worked, as you mentioned there, I was a youth director at a few churches in the area. But I've lived or worked in many of the communities of the area. So I have a real good understanding and grasp. This is not a monolithic community of one group of people living here in this district. It's people from varied backgrounds, varied demographics, and very life experiences. Some of them are first-time Americans who've just gotten here, first generation. Some of them aren't even Americans yet, but they're still members of the community. And so I try to focus on, what I would call, really the core mission of this. Number one, we got to first focus on getting jobs back into the district. We got to work on lowering the taxes, and we need to work on improving the quality of life for people here and reducing the cost of living. And then in terms of our social service and our social services net, which I think is very important, we need to make sure that we're taking care of our disabled people. We need to take care of our people on Social Security, particularly our seniors first, our senior Americans first. And of course, we should be taking care of our veterans. I don't know if you knew this or not, but during the Biden administration, homeless population of Americans, I'm not talking about the illegal aliens who crossed into our borders, but Americans, it doubled during that time. As it's the same thing with, we have homeless veterans in our communities. Before we start taking care of the rest of the world, I'm just simply asking people does this make sense? Does it make sense that grandma and grandpa are living hand to mouth from month to month after a lifetime of working and building our country, yet we've got billions of dollars that we can give to people who've never put a dime into the system, while our disabled brother, as in mine, has been living on a subsistence level for his entire life, basically? Is that right? So I think we've got to learn to understand, we got to put our priorities in order. I think I have a good grasp of that because I have a balance of having worked my way, and so I know the value of work, and I know that I'm not envious of people who've done better or people who already have, because life's a great equalizer. What's important is your journey, my journey, our journey as a community. So if we're advancing the community and yet individually achieving those things that God has put on us on our path to do, then that's great, and let's celebrate that. But what we don't want to do is create a thing where we're just simply out handing out fish every day, taking it out of the same pond, because eventually the fish get smaller and smaller that you're giving to everybody. Then everybody becomes envious and unhappy, and nobody knows how to fish. And they don't know that right next to them are a bunch of people who've learned how to fish, and they're taking big fish because they know how to get and go to different places, and then they become envious. We need to make people understand that they can stand up for themselves, that there is a path to the American dream, and that it is not lost. And so I want to be able to communicate that, it's called hard work. Mm-hmm. Now with some luck, you may do even better. But if you're hard work and you work hard, if you are consistent and you follow an established set of ethics and values, okay, you're probably going to end up doing pretty well in life. And we need to get that message out now to these younger people. So a big part of what I see me doing is sharing my experience of living here and growing up in the district to from a person with, who had an Isuzu pickup truck with a blown engine, a dog, an ex-wife, and a daughter, to becoming, retired lieutenant colonel with a PhD, houses in like 4 out of the 8 counties in the district. I mean, I'm not super rich or anything. I've just managed to handle my money well and work hard. If I can do it, starting off with nothing and as many bumps in the road as I've had, and there have been plenty, anybody can do it. Or let me say again, most people can do it. And that's what I want to help everybody achieve, that dream.
You'll be able to do that if you get in the office. I mean, that's the big key. And you've got a platform that is, I don't know, I've used the word before, pretty hefty. Okay? You basically support many of the current government initiatives. I mean, you want to reduce wasteful spending. You want to strengthen our borders. You want to make neighborhoods safe and promote reindustrializing our nation.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Bring back the jobs.
Bring back the jobs. You also want to improve services and support for our impoverished and overlooked. Okay, our disabled, our veterans. I suspect homeless are in there too. You want to help the homeless, those in need of mental health support, and those most vulnerable.
Yeah.
Okay. To do all that, and to be the person that you have become, you've got to have an idea in place because, how to go about doing this. Because part of it, you said earlier, is you know how to create teams. Mm-hmm. You've developed organizational leadership skills. You've got a master's. You've got a doctorate. You've got a lot of experience. You've spent 20 plus years in the military, whether as an active serviceman or in Department of Defense as a contractor. You've got a lot of experience, and you've had a lot of people reporting to you, and you've seen the bureaucracy that people have got to overcome in order to get someplace in life. Our government is rife with bureaucracy. Most of it's very inefficient. So when you become congressman, what are some of the things you want to do to achieve these goals and to reduce bureaucracy?
Okay, well, number one, we need to get a repeal, and they're already in the process of it, but we've got to repeal a lot of the regulations which have discouraged businesses from coming into the state, and that'll go into other states. So part of that is at the state level, but part of that is at the national level. Incentives that have been earmarks that go to other states but don't go to Illinois. Part of that is because Illinois doesn't have the clout. That's a Chicago word. It doesn't have it that it used to, because we've lost 30% of our national power in Congress. We used to have 24, now we have, get this, 17 going to 16 representatives in Congress. So what does that mean? That means that we've lost 1/3 of our legislative power up there on Capitol Hill. So we need to work on getting that back. And how do we do that? We turn the tide. We work with people at the state level to see what kind of things can be done at the national level and working, in tandem. So that's why when I put together forums, and I've done that a couple of times now, I bring and work with candidates of different offices so that we are developing this team that I'm talking about as we tackle different issues. So we started tackling, the issue of veteran suicide, which is more than just talk about the 22 plus and as many as maybe nearly 30 plus deaths per day, suicides of veterans every day.
30 plus deaths per day?
Yeah.
How come I haven't heard about those statistics?
Yeah, they don't, because it's not the bright shiny object, and that's where we need that. That's why we're raising that. Before a veteran is pushed to that point, we need to be able to have something. I can just share this, that when you get out of the military, regardless of your rank, it's very often like falling off a cliff. You've come in, you're used to an environment where there's a lot of bellicosity. That's a fancy word for saying, it's kind of, you got to put your war face on. You got to be tough. You got to be able to mix it up with people, and you have to find the right balance of. And then you go into a civilianized world, which is completely different than that military world in many, many areas. The team camaraderie that you've had in the military is gone. The sense of mission is gone. The job skills might be completely different, and your level of respect that you get from your peers is completely different. So we have a big issue that we need to tackle in our country to face the veterans. We need to make sure that no veteran who has written a blank check to their country should ever be homeless. We need to make sure that they get an opportunity to find a fulfilling career before we start taking care of the rest of the world. The same thing with those who are and I think that this is where this mirrors that. And at the national level, for whether it's for the veterans, but it's also for people who are seniors. Many people around 30 years ago were on a pension plan. So they paid their taxes, they had their house, they retired, and then they had their pension, and they had Social Security, and they had their savings, and they had their house. What happened? Our economy changed. The model that our corporate America embraced got rid of those things. Went to this. So yes, you were able to save money in like a company 401k. Maybe it did well, maybe it didn't do well. But at the same time, they didn't have that pension there. And then people, we're on a more transient society. So you're moving every couple of years. So how do you build 30 years worth of equity and have your house paid off by the time you're 65 when you retire? The answer, people aren't doing that. More and more people are retiring, and they're finding out that what they thought was a good amount of money saved is not a good amount of money saved. And so they're forced to make cuts. And, for some people who are fortunate enough, they're able to go and buy a new home and move down to Florida. But there's a growing number of people who can't. And the generation that passed before that handed down a lot, and there's a big exchange from one generation to the next, and that's great. But this is a problem that's been rapidly developing as our young people today are getting older and older before they can buy their first home, which pushes that time when they're able to achieve these things to a later date. So it's all interrelated.
Yes, it is. And you stated something that's extremely profound, but somewhat hidden in your message. And I'd like to bring it to the light a little bit. You talked about how things have changed in the last 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. Went from a one-income, household to two-income household. Now two-income households aren't enough to maintain the standard of living that people seen their parents have.
Right.
Okay. Part of that has to do with our educational system. When you went to school, when I went to school, they taught us economics. They taught us world history. We learned about budgets. We learned about the economy. We learned about different aspects to help us become better at managing our money, understanding how the world works. We don't do that anymore. A lot of the schools, kids don't even get out of high school knowing how to read at the senior level of high school. And they've got to go on to college if they can make it.
And they don't know how to cook. They don't know how to spend the money wisely because, all they know is the processed food world, the processed, latte world. And they don't realize that they're spending, every single day they're spending money that their parents would have been saving. And if their grandparents had seen this, they would be their grandparents or their great grandparents now, I guess, who had gone through the Depression, would be aghast at the waste that goes on. And, kids today, they've had such opportunities, but what's being taught in the schools, they're missing the value of what that dollar that they're getting and how to use it wisely. If you don't know how to cook, if you had $10 and you don't know how to shop right and get food, that $10 is gone in half a meal sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. But if you know how to shop, you can get a lot more with that dollar. You don't have to eat ramen noodles every day either. You can do, but you got to know that's just the basic things that are not being taught in there. But these are the same people, unfortunately, who've been completely indoctrinated into this doctrine of, envy of people who have put the work in, who have saved their money, who did get an education and get a job and did the hard or work extra jobs to save something, to make something of themselves. And so this, and sadly, it seems like the mainstream media, as they call it, does seem to be fostering that attitude. Remember, if there's a high reward, there's a high risk. And so many of these people who, he's a millionaire. Many, many millionaires have lost everything. I mean, you can go and talk to a lot of people in Enron, for example. Then that company went belly up. There's a lot of people out there who invested with different people thinking that was going to be the thing. People need to learn not to put all their eggs in the basket, but they need to at least put an egg in the basket. Mm-hmm. If you're not saving a certain amount every day for your future, you're making a terrible mistake. And, people need to learn about the economics, as you said, need to understand about buy a house, because that's the one thing that you can build your nest egg with that house. As it goes up, it's your tax advantage so many ways. And so people, and even the very rich people, but it's for a flash in the pan. You're, let's say you're a sports athlete or a musical artist. Once that big money goes away and you go broke, do you think the government is going to refund you all the tax money you paid? People need to learn at all levels to have common sense and to just, parlay what you've got, work with people. And this is where building teams comes in. You don't have to do it alone. Get some people that you can help you build a company. Try to be an entrepreneur, but do it in such a way that you've got a realistic thing, and it's not just chasing after something out in the sky. And I always say this, keep your eyes on the prize, but your nose to the grindstone. And that keep your feet on the ground, keep moving forward. If you just embrace some of these basic things that they used to teach us, everybody should have known that when we were in school, they would be a lot better off today.
When I was a young man, I was looking for my first house. And I had some background in economics and everything else, but I didn't know how to evaluate, do balance sheets and things like that. So I had to learn how to do that. And looking at houses, I suddenly realized that even if I buy a house that's distressed property, it's still a house. And it's still going to have be a big hole in the ground for a lot of money to be piled into. It's going to retain value. It's going to grow up, most likely. But I got to put a lot of money into it to maintain that value and allow it to appreciate. That's when I realized that there's a better way. I bought my first 6 flat instead of buying a house. I bought property. And I bought rental property because I knew there was income to be made by doing that.
Right.
If I'm putting the same amount of effort into it, then I might as well make some money on it and let it grow. That's what our young people are missing today. People that get out of school and don't have that background are also not being taught how to go and find out more information and where there are resources to get help so they can make those better educated decisions.
Yeah. Put your money to work. And that's what I did. And I have not really made it. I've been focused on other things. I've been trying to gather things. When I did have some money, I tried to help out my family members, and that's part of how I was able to end up with a couple of houses. Family first, So my brother needed a place to stay, or my mom needed a place to stay, and over time. And then when I was a lieutenant, and I just became a lieutenant, I had an opportunity to buy. I saw some land down in Georgia for sale, owner financing. Usually they end up ripping you off because it's such a high interest rate. But I took a chance. I bought it, and then I held on to it, and I paid it off. And then somebody wanted to buy it from me, so I sold it to them, and I used that, and I bought another piece of land up in Michigan. So my life dream is really to be set up this veterans training center, a kind of a rehab center, if you will. Kind of takes a holistic approach, mind, body, spirit, and training to be able to go back and work. So I don't know when or if I'll be able to get that off, completely. But I've got the skeletal plans put together. I've talked to people about it, and I do think this is a way that I can give back. We've got a few hundred acres up in Upper Michigan that we want to, set this training center up. So that's really a long-term goal, and working with different groups of people, I believe that that can come together. I think you reach a certain point in your life where you want to give back, not because out of guilt, not because you're going to manipulate people, but because you feel grateful that it wasn't a perfect ride, but it was a good ride. You got there, and you can give back, and this teaches people that I want to give back to my community. You follow the example of the people who shaped you, right? I had the example of people who coached me and shaped me. And I, that's why I emerged and being the kind of person I am today, I guess.
Giving back is profound. 28 years ago, I became a volunteer with the DuPage County Sheriff's Office as a patrol volunteer. And I did that. I'm still on the books as a volunteer. I don't go out as much anymore. I've gotten a lot older. But I still try to help out when I can. The people that volunteer for things like that, whether it's police, fire, other community service, they have the same perspective that you just stated. They want to give back. They want to help their neighborhoods, help the people that can't help themselves or need that extra assistance to get past themselves and on a different path.
Yeah.
Didn't you start a 501c3 at one point?
Yeah.
What was that about?
That was my program. It's called New Horizons for Heroes. But there's a lot of bureaucracy in trying to get that off the ground. And even though I wanted to make sure it was something which was above reproach. So I did not want to make it something where we're out asking people for money. I wanted to show I had skin in the game. But as a nonprofit organization, you have to file something with the government each year. But at the same time, I was also working. So I decided that the better way to handle it was to use the skills I was learning from the contracting work I was doing for the government. And I made that into an LLC. So, and basically the concept is that we will work with different companies who do business with the military or the government or wherever. And as they put out different requirements for people to work in certain types of jobs, that we would draw first from the veterans as they're getting out or who have gotten out, and try to help get them trained up to do these jobs. So we're doing the work of getting the veterans back into an environment where they're familiar with, but at the same time getting the meaningful work that's closely aligned with the skill sets that they've got. And at the same, and concurrently, right, they can also be in a place where, it's kind of enjoyable, kind of a pastoral setting with cabins or whatever that they can go to. So that's kind of evolved to the point where I was talking with I was at the Crystal Lake American Legion. They have a place that we meet at on Friday mornings, the other side. And basically we're drinking coffee and talking about, we could get together with some of these veterans groups. We go up there, and each group that goes up, they can get like an acre, and they work on that, and they set it up, and then we work out an agreement with the wildlife refuge, and then that gives us access over to the river. Maybe we build a path, and then each of these groups of veterans, individually or collectively, then would be that's kind of their work project, and it gives them a sense of fulfillment, because work is work. And you can love your work, or you can just look at work as work. But there's also something to be said that, work is a means to an end. And so, the means to the end is actually, look, I'm earning the money so I can go and set this up. And for me, I feel like this is a really important lesson to impart to people, and I'm building a log cabin, but I'm keeping my hands busy, and my mind is kind of thinking about things, and I'm working on solutions for other things, and that helps them. And so that's the program that I want to start someday. I'm developing the network of contacts, and like I said, I've already got the land, which is a huge part of it, right? Mm-hmm. And I think a big part of it has been leading by example, setting the example for others to follow, and say, hey, let me show you what I've done. Now, I'm not going to give you guys the fish, but if you want to go up and fish, if you want to go up and build a cabin, here's some land to do it on,
Let me know how I can help you with that. That sounds like a very important project and can help a lot of people, particularly a lot of veterans in transition. Going back from military to civilian life, that could be tough.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's kind of where...
That's where you're coming from?
Yeah, at that place. I mean, I've done a few investigations while I was in the military of soldiers who passed away for various reasons. The toughest ones to me was when I learned about a young man who had committed suicide while we were on a base in Iraq. We had more suicides there than probably at any other base. In fact, I think the commander of the whole of Iraq's multinational core force came down there and talked to our commander. I think he was very upset about it. But I remember doing this particular investigation, and this was a young man, a young private first class, PFC, who had committed suicide because he was being ostracized by his group who had expectations, and so he lost his connection with his community. And there were others, and I just felt, people shouldn't be pushed to that point. We need to be able to, and especially when people get out of the military. I lost one of my former NCOs after he had gotten out of the military, got in some trouble, and we lost him. Even though it had been several years, it still hurt. I still, wish that I can just remember my former NCOIC, Dave, had just emailed him, said, "What are you doing? Get back to me, talk to me," and it was too late. He lost sight. And he felt all alone. Now he had done something probably that had gotten him in big trouble, but he had lost touch with his community, and all of the other things just overwhelmed him. And for when people get to that point, we need to be there for them.
This is where women are one step up above us as men. We are more alone than the women. They talk, they share, they understand what each other's going through. At least they want to explain it, and they want to help each other. We don't do that.
Yeah.
As a guy, it's a sign of weakness to share something like that. So we hold it within. And unfortunately, we need to understand and remember that everybody around us, you, my producer, whoever is around you, they do care. If you need help, they just need you to ask. But people, if they don't see it, they're not aware of it, then it gets forgotten, pushed by the wayside, and you feel alone, and you feel like, what's the point of living? I suspect that almost everybody at some point has gotten low in their life, but they've had family. Most of them had family, friends, other resources to draw from to get them through that tough time. The ones that commit suicide don't have that resource.
They have a crisis.
They have a crisis.
So I would just say that someone very close to our family that went through that. I would just say there's been too many people that I've known, unfortunately, who had that, and they lost sight. And then it's kind of funny when you get back from a deployment. They always ask, well, do you feel like hurting yourself or do you feel like hurting others? I mean, you're talking to somebody who's a career military officer or in CIC. You think they're going to say, "Oh yeah, my supervisor who came into my office and would cuss me out on a daily basis." Yeah, of course. No, I never had any negative thoughts about that. I mean, it's kind of silly, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But the obligatory ask is there. So to be able to really understand, and being a good commander is, I love this one general said it he said it best. Do you know the sound of your voices in the night of your soldiers? Right when you talk to them, do you know who that is by the sound of their voice? So as a commander, we have them around us. We can shepherd them, right? Mm-hmm. Because we know them. We should know them so well. We know them by the sound of their voice. I'm not sure if that was General Riley who said that, or another commander, but that was really a good piece of advice right there.
That's pretty profound.
You got to know your soldiers well enough that you know their voices.
Mm-hmm. Which makes me think about all the people that are abandoned veterans in the various cities they're living in. Some of them are homeless. Some of them feel alone. Mm-hmm. Okay, the sense of community that they don't have right now is something that's what VFWs are for, Legion Halls are for. The people that are involved, they try to create that sense of community.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people out there who never served, but there's opportunities to serve. Mm-hmm. They can get involved with the Legion, with the VFW. I don't know about the VFW because I understand
they have auxiliaries. They have different types of
they have auxiliaries
support
for civilians.
Mm-hmm. They have different types of support. People come in, support them.
So we need to basically let people know that if they want to help, if they want to do not community service, but do actually civic responsibility to serve their nation. They can do it without being in the service. They can get involved with the American Legion, VFW. They can participate that way, meet veterans, and be part of a larger group, larger organization where they can make a difference in the life of somebody who served his nation.
Yeah, I mean, they have the Marine Corps League. They got the DAV. AMVETS, there's a lot of organizations that are out there. The Association of the United States Army doesn't even require you to be a member of the military. But through that, you can do a lot to help out military service members and their families. Actually, membership is free. AUSA.org. It's free to join it. And they have a wide variety of programs aimed at supporting military members and their communities all across the country. I've been a member of AUSA more than 25 years, and through them, I have been able to submit legislative proposals that went into the resolution book that was briefed to Congress. So I've been submitting legislative type of work really for 25 years, as a matter of fact. Because of my commitment, I saw that as a part of my role and responsibility as a commander, as an officer. Every officer holds a special position of leadership and trust. That's what our oath starts off with, and I take that very seriously. And so, yeah, that's where I felt like I did receive some medal for voluntary service and other things. I received several. I guess one of my more proud as a captain, I got a meritorious service medal. They don't give them that many of them to captains, so it's kind of a nice thing. And I remember that it was because I was the one out of the brigade and maybe the Corps, that I was one of the best commanders in terms of how I took care of people. I took care of everybody as if they were my family. And I was working at a brigade headquarters. I had officers who were senior to me. I had officers who were my peers. I had junior officers and junior soldiers and NCOs. And we made that work. We really made that. It was the largest signal company. It has over 200, I think I had like 220, 240 people in the company, which is pretty large for a commander to have. And it was geographically dispersed, so I had people in multiple locations. And that was one of my proudest moments, that I went in there and we built a team. We became the Highlanders. We had the little Highlander Award, and we built a lot of esprit de corps and, functionality in a very, previously had been very disjointed, dysfunctional environment. It can be done. It can be done in a short time. And you asked me earlier about all of these different things that are on the agenda. The way that you do that is you build community. You build a network. You reach out and you find out what are the ways that, what are people looking for, and how can we ethically move it so that those can occur. And we talk about our common ground. And that's where I feel like I have something to offer to everybody in this district, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, or whatever. The common ground. Most people, not all, but most people want to have a decent standard of living when they retire. Most people, if they do have children, want their children to be able to grow up and have a good education and have a good job. Not everybody, apparently, but, most people would like to see their tax dollars spent appropriately so that the money that they go in comes back into their community to reinvigorate the community, to rebuild the infrastructure so that they can get more jobs to come in here. And that's where the role of, my role would be to bring those federal dollars back into Illinois to be used appropriately, to help the legislations get passed, and to support legislators who are taking on those different projects, whether it's on the local community to help get that plant in Belvedere started, or to bring back more meat processing plants, or to help our farmers diversify from simply soybeans and corn here in Illinois, or to maybe put a brakes on all these big warehouses, or really just the immediately just getting rid of every farming community within 45, 50, 60 miles of Chicago, and turning it into just a rubber stamp of houses as people are frightened out of the inner city and they move further out. So yeah, those are all of those things. We can do this, but it takes a little bit of know-how of what the issues are, and I think I have a good grasp of that. The second thing is to work with people and to build community, and then go after it.
Mike, you definitely could build community. I can see that. You can reach the people. You'll be able to discuss with them rationally and with authority exactly what's needed to be done, but you're also willing to listen to them and make certain that all their concerns and their needs are not overlooked, and that you take those to Washington to make a difference. Yeah. And you'll be able to, in Washington, create legislation and pass laws that'll help Illinois.
Yeah.
Okay, and Illinois needs a lot, as you well know. So with that being said, I'd like to take this moment to thank you, Mike, our Lieutenant Colonel, retired, Mike Pierce, okay, candidate for Congress, District 11. Thank you so much for coming here. It was really a pleasure. You explained a lot, and I'm sure the people that watch this podcast are going to be very impressed.
Jack, it's been a very great honor and pleasure for me as well. Thank you so much for inviting me today. It's been a great talk. Thank you.
Thank you. If anybody wishes to reach out to Mike to join his campaign, share your concerns, or just exchange ideas, he can be reached through his website at votepierceforcongress.com. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to bringing you additional conservative views. Thanks again.